On the Level podcast, your Masonic podcast. Join the hosts Billy McIntyre and Sam Earl Sedgey as they delve into the world of Freemasonry.
In a world that's seen better days, one that sometimes is easy to lead the weak on a path of darkness, one man rises above the rest to lead those and guide others in a path towards further light in Masonry. Someone who has a clear path towards the light of further in Masonry. One man who is not afraid to say what needs to be said and point out the best, and also who is not afraid to defend the weak and raise an axe to defend the widows and orphans. That man is none other than the one and the only Sir Sam Sedgey.
What an opening! You know,
Sam, I do the best I can. I really do.
Oh, mate, that was epic. Billy, you are too kind. You are too kind in building the myth and legend.
I'm going to get into the movie business someday.
That's what you got the voice for it. I thought I was listening to some sort of Hollywood movie intro. I was like,
you know what? I got a face made for radio. I really do.
I was like, when's the box office? What movie is this? I want to go pay cinema tickets. And well, first of all, how are you, Billy, my worshipful brother?
I am doing swell.
Yes.
I've been trying to help out with a little bit of degree work in my area, and I just got done with ICOD last night, which it'll be a little later after you hear this, but I got to see all the grand officers from our Grand Line here in Illinois and got to talk to them, and a couple of them voiced their interest in coming back on the podcast again, so that was really cool. And I didn't even have to, beg them or get on my knees and plead with them to come on. They said they would, without me having to beg. So that's always a good day for us.
I mean, there's such a good line. But before we get into that, what is ICOD, Billy?
ICOD is, that's what Illinois Council of Deliberation, and that's what Scottish Rite. And I should have did that without you having to ask, but thank you for reminding me. That's the Scottish Rite. That's where they all get together in Illinois here, and we just take care of the business of Scottish Rite. We make the decisions and get together with all the leadership, with all the valleys, and just see how things are going to run for the next of the year.
That sounds
a good
awesome.
time. And we also give some awards to members that have done outstanding things. The northern jurisdictions are the ones that, run that. And where Illinois is in the northern jurisdiction, Scottish Rites broke up into two jurisdictions, the southern and the northern. And they, they give out some worthy brothers. And it's a pretty good time for everybody. We have a meal, with all Masonic meals. It's not just this one. Usually you pay about $70 and you get a piece of meat that's about the size of a $50, and you leave and your belly's still growling, but that's just the way of the world, It's just the way it is.
No, cool. I mean, a lot of people didn't know what ICOD was. I guess that's basically the state level grand sessions equivalency for the Scottish Rite.
In that acronym for everything around here,
right? Absolutely. And I'm glad you guys had a good time. I miss doing the ritual. I always say one of my greatest achievements wasn't all these titles that's been bestowed upon me. One of the things that was most satisfying, the two most satisfying things for me, were becoming a Master Mason. And that to me is a huge, huge honor and a huge privilege. And then the second, I think, big thing that made me kind of like, yes, I've achieved something great, was becoming a Knights Templar.
Sure.
And everything else is, just a privilege and an honor. And then I think, without realizing it, and it was just quite recent, but being the worshipful master of Frank and Nickel Lodge. That was a big thing, and I can't wait to, dedicate many years to that lodge and give it all my all. And so I can't wait to do a lot more. And I just did miss. I miss the ritual. I miss the
Mm-hmm.
basic things and going around like I used to and just helping in degree work, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
I enjoyed a lot of the stuff of just going around and helping around in the I really enjoy the ritual. I enjoy seeing the light in the candidate's eye, the excitement they have
Oh, sure.
if we're going through the initiation, and then being able with the degree team of the particular area or lodge and putting on good degrees to really kind of like inspire the candidate and give him the excitement and inspiration and history that was given to me. So it's it's something I
Yeah.
miss, but
And you know how we've always. I'm sorry.
go.
No, I was saying, and we've talked about it several other times, but I'll mention it again. And no matter how many times you go through a degree, the more you pay attention, you'll pick up something every time you go through. Something that you maybe missed, and it's really cool when you do that. When you listen to ritual and maybe hear something maybe that you've heard 100 times, you think, wow, I see how that relates to this part. Or maybe I never thought about it this way before. And you just pick up something different and it's really cool. Ritual is so deep and teaches us so much if we just pay attention to it.
Absolutely. And then before we get into the meat of this episode, I just want to let everyone know if you hear a bit of background noise, I have my air condition on, my aircon system's on. It's actually not very hot today. It's here. It's basically 9:30 in the morning. I believe it's like 8:30 p.m. of your time. So
Yeah.
there's a massive time difference. And I've got my Diet Coke. I'm in my studio, my recording studio, my hobby studio, my music studio, all into one. So I'm in one of my favorite places here, and I'm looking forward to this show, which is we're gonna go for some history, but we're gonna go for some myth busting, Freemasonry conspiracy myth busting. I think it's important to address the elephant in the room, the conspiracy theories in the room, that
Yeah,
basically.
because we've had some pretty massive stuff here lately coming on the internet. So good to kind of clear the air with some stuff.
Absolutely. I think it's time to address a lot of hocus pocus, a lot of fallacies, and just basic, absolute barefaced lying. And so, without any more, I'm not sure if people have been aware, but there was a certain particular prominent figure going on a very prominent podcast on YouTube, making very, very strong assertions to some things which are ridiculous. And some of the assertions, and this is not something that's kind of new. It's actually very old, and it's tied into a lot of mythos and also a lot of propaganda that was set out. And so this apparent interviewee claimed, and he could be. I don't have the details, and I don't have the facts and figures with me, so I'll give him the benefit of a doubt. But apparently, this very well-known prominent figure, Hollywood figure, was initiated in our 3 degrees, and although he didn't go into the 3 degrees much, and although it seemed he was very respectful of the people of that particular lodge, which is why I give him that benefit of the doubt. There was just these weird things he started talking about how demons would call him during his time of going through the degrees, and how these demons would basically say all these weird things to him over the phone. First of all, Billy, as soon as I heard that, I really want to know what network service these demons were using, and what monthly rate
Hmm.
they were paying.
That's a valid question.
Were
Valid
they,
question.
was a demon on Verizon? I mean, was he on unlimited free pay? making these calls. And to be honest, I would question about these demonic forces. What's happened to them? Because back in the days, if we want to go into historical, back in the medieval days, there were apparitions that would appear in front of the person and would directly talk to them, apparently. That's, if you go back into, what people would say in, exorcisms or in basically in documented things. And now we've got these apparent demons calling you on the mobile phones. I mean,
Yep.
in the era when there weren't mobile phones, because here's the thing, right? Mobile phones is a fairly new, in our lifetime, it's a fairly new tech, right? It wasn't there in the 80s in mass.
Right.
So when there weren't mobile phones and people were doing degrees, and if these demons were how would they contact? Was it by letter? Like, dear, and how would they?
You know what? When I guess I'm telling my age, but I used to watch Get Smart on TV, and he had that shoe phone.
Right.
So I'm wondering if maybe the demons could have called him on that shoe phone.
I mean, they may have called him on, your basic telephone line, your landline. But the problem with landline is, what if the person wasn't at home? Before the answering machine.
There you go. Would he left a message?
Right.
Would he left a message on the answering machine?
And here's the thing.
I don't know.
And here's the thing. If there were these demons calling him, well, how many demons were calling brethrens before him when there wasn't the phone? Because the fraternity's been around for a very long time. I mean, I just wonder, when there was no phone, would it be, a little note on a piece of paper, an envelope, a little letter?
Well, see, but my phone come up if it's possible scam on my cell phone. So would it block him? Or does it come up demon call? I don't know if it would come up, announcing him as a demon.
And the problem is with this type of nonsense is when someone who's prominent and when someone who has credibility in the stuff they've done in their professional career, let's just say, and when there are people who, like a lot of us, have a lot of close religious inclination, do believe there are a lot of people in the world, even today, who believe in the supernatural. They believe in good and evil. They believe in the divine. They believe in there are other forces around. And when they don't have all the information about Freemasonry, about the Brotherhood, about faith, hope, and charity, about the history, which I encourage you, all of you guys, to listen to our historical episodes that we've done on Knights Templars, the Empire and Craft, the historical episodes we're going to give you. It is very easy to fall into these fallacies because you're dealing with something that it's unknown, and you're getting a perspective of someone who could have actually had sometimes have, a bad experience. And what do I mean by that, Billy? Well, here's the thing about Freemasonry, and we're going to talk a lot about facts here and not myths and conspiracies and mythology and all this nonsense. Okay, let's talk about the boring aspects, which actually are very important. The structure of Freemasonry. Freemasonry, if you look at the structure of Freemasonry and how it's codified, is heavily decentralized. So what do I mean by that? So every jurisdiction, every area, whether it's a country or in America, it's the states, the 50 states, has a Grand Lodge. And that Grand Lodge has something called the bylaws of the Grand Lodge. And these are the rules and regulations, basically. And it's kind of comprehensive. This isn't, a small little thin booklet. It's got a lot of rules of how to operate not only the Grand Lodge, how the Grand Lodge is operated, but how lodges are operated. From how you elect a fellow person to become a member, from how you meet, and from how who are the officers of a lodge, who are the officers of a Grand Lodge, what are the roles and responsibilities of particular positions. It's heavily codified to protect the craft from inconsistencies, from duplicity, from fraud, from criminality, from all sorts of things that not only relate for today, that related for today, but also related for hundreds of years. In fact, one could argue that Freemasonry was one of the most advanced structures that was basically codified and built over the medieval period, the Renaissance period. Some could argue that it was the foundation, the basis of what many organizations now run today. A lodge, officers very much function like a board. You have the worshipful master, who, in fact, is a de facto elected CEO of the board. He has a 1-year term. Now, obviously, a lot of CEOs, their tenure is longer, but in lodges, it's usually 1 year. You have the deputy, which is usually your senior warden, and then you have your junior warden, who basically, is supposed to work with the deacons and stuff like that. You've got your treasurer, which you have on a board. Basically, you have your secretary, who's integral, who basically manages the board and the notes and makes sure the meetings are well kept and everything is organized. And all of these things are fundamental in a lot of organizations, whether it is a PLC or an LLC or a partnership or a charity or any kind of, or even if you're running a club. I remember being in the wargaming clubs, and even the wargaming clubs, we ran it like you had to have a secretary. Where there was a monthly meeting where we had to talk about the boring stuff, not about playing war games, but what's in the club funds, what are the plans we're going to do for the members of the club who are playing war games. How many more gaming boards are we going to have? Have we got enough space for the terrain? Are we paying, can we afford our rent fees in the working man's club that we're renting? And all these things were discussed at the meeting of the elected officers of that gaming club. And then you had the chair, you had a treasurer, you had a secretary, you had officers that were responsible for different aspects of the club. That focus on different games. One would focus on the sci-fi game. One would focus on the fantasy game. There would be one would be in charge of recruiting. And then what I'm trying to say is, although it wasn't functioning directly like a lodge, it had the functions of a lodge. We were then part of a supernatural organization that headed all the wargaming clubs in the UK. And some of us were elected to go and basically, represent our club and the rest of the UK. Very much like in Freemasonry, where you have your local club or your local lodge, and then you'll have your area guy who would look after the area, and then you'll have your guys who will look after the entire country or state or province. And so Freemasonry and the structure of Freemasonry has always been emblematic of that. And in fact, very radical as well, because as you go back through the centuries, that formation was very radical, was very antithetical to autocracy, was very antithetical to tyranny. It what brought in for businesses the expansion of capital, and it what raised people up to beyond the means of what they were doing in people from, let's just say, normal villages or community towns became mayors or went up in society. And so a lot of the originalities of formation of these structures, actually you can relate it to our structure in Freemasonry, which has stood the test of time. So you've got the codification of the Grand Lodge and the laws there, the bylaws we call them, of that particular structure. But then remember I said it's very decentralized. So then you have all these lodges that have a lot of independence in how they're run, have a lot of freedoms in how they're run, as long as they adhere to the codes in the Grand Lodge's bylaws. Now in England, and this does happen in Illinois as well, but in England very specifically, and this should happen actually I would encourage this, that every lodge in Illinois or any lodges around the world do this. But one thing I love about English tradition is that when you become a Master Mason, not only are you given your ritual book, but you're given the lodge's bylaws and the bylaws of the Grand Lodge. Because without knowing the rules, and without understanding the rules, there is a whole part of Freemasonry and the function of Freemasonry, especially in your stated meetings and as officers, when you become officer, that you miss, and there's a lot of learning to do. From, how do you, when someone gets into the fraternity, who goes and interviews? How many people are supposed to interview? What are the rules in interviewing? How do we keep it as partial as possible, as opposed to being impartial? How do we keep it as transparent as possible? There are rules of how we elect people and how we bring people in. There are actual procedural things. So a lot of this may be news to a lot of people who are listening in, but there's a whole edifice of rules. We are a rules-based order organization, and some of it can get quite, you can really get into the weeds here. And so let's just take that for a part and then talk about the decentralization of how lodges have a lot of freedoms in terms of how when a lodge meets, is based on, the rules of that lodge. In terms of Grand Lodge dictates how many times a year minimum you should meet. So in Illinois, it's usually, I believe, 10 times a year, I think, minimum.
Right.
In England, it's 4 times a year. In Scotland, it's very much every month, like 10 times a year as well. So when you hear in England, we go dark during the summer, usually during the summer, lodges aren't open, basically. But they do still meet 4 times a year. And here in Illinois, there are some lodges that have in their bylaws, we go dark in the month of July or June or whatever. That means they do not open in those months. And so the point is, lodges have a lot of discrepancy, have a lot of independence, as long as they don't go beyond the supremacy of particular codes in the Grand Lodge's bylaws. And there is a structure. There are people, like, I think we may have had them or not, or we will have some, like district grand deputies, district grand deputy masters, and they're kind of your area managers who sometimes pop in and just see how the brethren are doing and making sure they're there to represent the Grand Lodge and make sure members have got everything they need and see if there's anything they can do to help the lodge in any way that they can. And then you've got, your certified lodge instructors, and you've got your those guys that basically have gone the next level in their ritual, and they basically teach other people ritual, which is fantastic. And so you have an organization that's there for the membership, but it's really the members of that lodge who run that lodge and who have the capacity to grow that lodge. And so there's this massive decentralization, and that decentralization works on the basis of recruiting good men of good, strong principles, good values and behaviors. And it's a phenomenal and magical thing to see when you have a bunch of good men getting together and the wonders they create together in serving their community, with faith, hope and charity in terms of giving back to their community, to their locality, building a great lodge of great men, and then building a lodge of great leaders who then go to do amazing things, not only for their community, but for their state or their province or for their country. It's just an amazing thing, and Freemasonry history is littered with that. You're going to go into a few things about that in the earlier days of the United States of America and predating the United States when it was the colonies. And so when you have a decentralized network, there are some weaknesses to it. There are some dangers to it. And the dangers is when things go wrong. Sometimes you get the wrong people, let's just say. Sometimes the recruitment structure hasn't worked effectively as it should have. Things have slipped, and sometimes some places go clandestine or go wrong or need help or whatever the issue is. And a lot of times, those areas may have an effect. And this person who was spouting all this nonsense may have gone to a lodge where he was looking for light, or maybe he was disappointed with what he got, and then he's come back with all this, or maybe he was not right for the fraternity. Maybe he was looking for titles and looking for power where there is none. It's the fraternity is about being a better man. It's about creating a better version of yourself as a man, as a father, as a person in your neighborhood and the community, and what you can do for those around you. And so,
And can I
go.
can I cut in something here
Yeah,
too?
absolutely,
And
please.
another thing, and one thing that really helped the fraternity somewhat, if not, didn't help it in other ways. When National Treasures, the Nicolas Cage movie, come out, there was a lot of interest in Freemasonry because the movie had Freemasonry references in it. If you remember, he'd found clues, and they were Freemasonry clues. As he was looking for this treasure, and a lot of people assumed because this movie was looked like it was based on realistic things about the Knights Templar's treasures, that they would get into masonry and find all these treasures and these hidden secrets. And I talked to a lot of new members when they come in, and they was asking about, well, we learn about all these historic treasures and these things and they were dead serious when they come in. And I said, that's not what masonry's about. You're looking for treasures, but you're going to lay up knowledge, and that's the treasures you're looking for. And you could just tell by the look on their face that's not what they were looking for, and that's a shame in its own right. And maybe because this guy was somewhat influential, being that he was a famous person, and we're not going to name him, but maybe he was looking for something that he didn't find.
Absolutely,
I'm not saying that's the case, but
absolutely.
it could be that could be the thing.
Absolutely. And I got to give the lodge, because the lodge he mentions, and what was really funny and what was really interesting is when you mention lodge and when you are a Freemason, when you mention your lodge, you just don't mention just your lodge. You also mention your lodge and your lodge number. Your lodge number
Yeah.
is very important. And he didn't. And the name he gave that lodge, which I won't give on the show, there's two types of that lodge in that particular locality. And there are two. One was created in the 80s, and one has been there for a long time, and it's got a lot of historical elements, and actually it's been kept as a historical piece, and it's been renovated, and it's been a great part of that particular community. So I'm interested if one, he was actually a member, two, if he actually, and I think he was, but someone so prominent like that, it'll be very difficult. If he was lying, it'll be a bit of a shocker. But trying to twist that, and again, there are other movies as well. You see, this is the thing about the imagination.
Yeah.
Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider was a movie with
Mm-hmm.
Angelina Jolie, and it was about the
Mm-hmm.
Freemasons, and the Freemasons looking for this ultimate power, this ultimate thing that will take, they give them all this power.
Yep.
And there was complete nonsense, and there was complete fabrication, but great movie to watch, and great mythos, great story. And there was another one called Assassin's Creed, which
Yep.
put us Freemasons in a really weird light. I mean, it was really weird seeing them replicate the Grand Lodge of England, and seeing these
Yep.
cultish type of kids, swing left and right. I was like, that's not Freemasonry. But again, these are fictional, highly creative, absolute fantasy movies that are built to entertain you. And sadly, sometimes they make us look, supernatural, and give us basically that mysterious mythos that sometimes shrouds people in fear, and they're uneasy, and people look at us like, what we're like, and are we kind of like a cult, or is there demonic possession, which is actually spouted by a lot of people who normally I would look up to, or normally have an area of authority, and just get disappointed when they're spouting absolute fallacies and absolute lies, because sometimes, sadly, in this day and age, and even before, people are very tribal. People are very protective of their own tribe, of their own herd, of their own congregation, let's just say. And Freemasonry has not only been a threat to autocracies and tyrannies, but it has been a threat to establishments, which always say we are the way. Where in Freemasonry,
Right.
for us, it's about logic, truth, the ability to get together, and discuss things without fear or favor. Brotherhood, unity. One of the greatest things about Freemasonry, which originated in Europe and in England, Scotland, and Ireland, and in the mother countries, as we say, was unifying Christians. But people forget, historically, back in the days, being a Protestant and a Catholic was as bad as it is today. Like if you were in India, and if you were a Hindu and a Muslim, and you were burning each other's temples and mosques down, or if you were in Northern Ireland in the 80s and 90s, where they were literally killing each other, Protestants and Catholics. And if you go back hundreds of years, there were hundreds and thousands of Europeans died over the diaspora, and how fractured Christianity was in Europe, and all the denominations that there were. And so Freemasonry was a place where, whether you were whatever Christian denomination you were, it was a place where you didn't have to worry about. You could actually meet someone across the aisle and understand someone really well, And there was a saying, and it's very difficult to find out if there's any truth to this, but I actually believe this happened. There's a saying in Northern Ireland, when there was the Catholics versus Protestants, that it wasn't the politics that brought people together, but it was a lot of the Freemasons who were Freemasons, but of different sides, that brought people to the table, and were able to not discuss politics or religion, but were able to discuss the communities and what the communities needed, having that peace and that harmony. And if I've known anything about Freemasonry, and you've been a past most illustrious Grand Master, I've been on the grand levels and grand lines. I'm a Knights Templar. I'm also part of SMOTJ, which is SMOTH, all these other bodies as well beyond Freemasonry. These are noble, honourable structures. A lot, if you go back to our other episodes about the Cistercian monks and how they started and how they got organised, a lot of that originated from that to the Knights Templars to here we are today. And you forget that when you have an organisation that the Nazis tried to kill off in Germany, 200,000 men, German men, were killed because they were Freemasons. And then you had not the religions, but the people in the power of those religions coming after Freemasons and killing them. When you have complete opposites coming, and where Freemasonry is banned in autocratic states or one-party states, which they are, then that should tell you something. It should tell you that a place which practices free and fair elections within within the lodges, a place that practices absolute partiality in conduct, a place that practices Robert's Rules of Order. Like, for example, if someone stands and a member in a lodge, in my mind, has always been the most powerful member, not this worshipful master, not the senior wardens or junior wardens or the officers. The actual member. It's the member who can bring up a proposition to be voted on. So what does a member do?
Sure.
A member, if you want to do something in a lodge, let's say, Billy and Sam are in the same lodge, and I like, you know what? Do you know what would be really nice? I would really like to run this event, and this event is going to help this community. Or why don't we take the brothers out for a steak dinner? We don't all sit down and go, oh, that's a good idea, let's do it. No, it doesn't work like that. It's like, okay, make a proposition. So, okay, I propose that we do this at this time, and I think this will be great for the lodge. And then the members in the same meeting get a vote, and the worshipful masters, there's a discussion. If there's a discussion needs to be had, if people disagree, they will stand up and say they'll give their points of view. If people agree, they stand up and they give their points of view, and then a vote's made, and then the majority, the one who wins the vote, that becomes something that becomes actioned. Now that's a far cry from demons calling you and making a phone call for a phone and give. Now it could be someone pranked him. It could be someone from his family who was ultra rigorous or fanatical about something in their faith or whatever, that didn't want this particular gentleman to continue the path of Freemasonry,
Right.
and just mess with him.
Here's something I'd like to speculate about. So he acted like the demons called him multiple times. And if that's the case, I don't know about you, but if I actually thought a demon was calling me, would you answer the phone the second time? Because I don't think I would answer the phone. The first time would be enough for me. I wouldn't answer a demon the second time. I think I just have to block that number. I'd be done with that.
Do you know what's really funny? Do you know what's really funny for me? The reason why I laugh, Billy, is that first of all, the investigative head, my head goes, well, hold on a second. I want to know what service this particular, being from a different realm would have to pick up a phone, be part of a monthly pay to go service or a monthly service. Which network service is he using, right? Who sold him the monthly deal? Who sold him the phone to make the phone call?
Yeah.
Right. And he even says in the thing, a number was coming up on my phone. For a number to come up on your phone, right, means it's been it means it's been registered and it's active.
Well, yeah.
And someone's paying for it.
When you call me, Sam, it comes up Peoria. So do you think that come up hell, or where do you think it come up?
I don't know. I mean, does hell have its own phone service? I mean, this is how ridiculous.
It must.
And then when you break it down logically and trying to think about this, okay, well, if this did happen, why are they using mobile phones? I mean, have they become pansy demons? Because back in the medieval times, they would have to appear. Because there was no method of phones or telephones or TV screens or internet or websites or whatever. So is this demon sitting on a lazy boy chair with his his fizzy drink or his beer, and then making prank
on a crossroads or something, didn't they?
I don't know. It's just so you got to break. But the problem is not a lot of people start breaking things down. And those who have valid beliefs in religious beliefs, people. This is the reason why it really upsets me, right? I could have joined Freemasonry in my 20s. I was very interested. Mm-hmm. I was very, very interested in joining Freemasonry in my 20s, Billy. And me being me, maybe that was a bad side of me, still a bad one. I like to do my research. I like to know what I'm getting into before I do something. I want to make sure that I'm doing it for the right reasons. And the reasons why I didn't, even though I was close of joining back then, was all the myths. All the myths about all the lies. Myths is actually a very light word. The lies. The blatant lies. The lies and the horrible things they said. Oh, well, you have to spit on the cross, and you have to do some certain acts, basically, that will go against your principles. You have to kiss a guy on the cheek or kiss the guy's bum or whatever. And all of this is not true. Or they'll bring this prostitute where you have to kiss her bum or something. I read all this. I was in my 20s. I was reading all this nonsense and all this crap. And it was quite frightening. And sadly, and quite honorably, see, when you're an honorable person and you make oaths of high principle, and these oaths are based on high principle and the high values and high behaviors, and you're sworn to keep those oaths secret. You can't go and just say no, actually that's not true, this is actually what you've made that promise, and you can't break it. And so that gives a free, and this is where the darkness comes in, that gives a free rein for all the detractors to say what they can say, knowing that there's going to be no comeback. That's the problem. So I'm going to make it up. Let's just say I made an oath to, shake your hand and, just be your best buddy or whatever and be there for you to the end because I'm a good guy. I can't say that out loud, but someone can say, oh, that actually what the oath he made was on a pentagram and blah, 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 blah. All this nonsense, basically. And he's got free reign. He's got free press. And so that's the problem Freemasonry's had through the ages. And we've kept our heads down. We've, soldiered on. We've done the best we can in doing the best we can in being better men and serving our communities, our families, our brotherhood. And the issue that really upsets me is all of those fallacies, that although that gentleman wasn't there saying those things 20 years ago, someone like him was saying that got me to read it, got me to worry about it. And it was my fear. It was my absolute fear of having to go through a certain type of ritual that would compromise me. And I can tell you for a fact, there are no compromising situations. You're never compromised at all.
No.
And that's the problem. And then people buy that filth, these lies, these packets of lies, and they turn it, and it becomes sensation. They sensationalize it. And that sensationalization, gives them gravitas in the field or the crowd that they're trying to swindle. And so that's the reason why I think it's important to do this episode of myth busting in Freemasonry. And I would argue that Freemasonry has been one of the greatest organizations in the world that's brought more light, more hope, more faith, more charity. It's brought more people closer to God, and all the great things that brings, than anything else. And the organization's been very humble through the ages, and it's kept its head down, and it's done the best it can do for humanity. And all the detractors, all the naysayers, they haven't been honest, and they haven't been willing to actually sit down and talk to a Freemason or a Freemason of note that could actually put their minds to ease and move on. And so that's what I've got to say. And if you want any facts, a lot of priests in a lot of Christian orders, a lot of politicians, a lot of most famous men in history have been Freemasons. So what, are these all evil people? Are these all demonic forces? No, not at all. And it's just nonsense. And it's just really sad to see people go on national platforms that reach millions of people, that espouse all these horrendous lies and fallacies, and get people worried. They worry. And
Sure.
if you detract one good man from joining Freemasonry because of you espousing these fallacies, you don't have you and me bashing. We've done 30 episodes. We haven't bashed one religion, one political organization.
No.
We haven't bashed anyone. You keep it respectful, and we try to go through history as respectful as we can, and just showing issues within organizations, but also not blaming the core tenets of that organizations is just usually people who get corrupt with power and then tend to then go do bad and mad things. And I think this is a good segue, as we've said a lot. I've said a lot. I want to take what you've got to say about this, and then move on and let's talk about the Sons of Liberty and St. Andrew's Lodge in
Right.
in
Well,
the colonies.
it's it's my opinion that when I mentioned earlier about the Knights Templar and them thinking that they're going to find the treasures of the Knights Templar, and there may be a Knights Templar treasure hidden out there somewhere, and it might be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. I don't know, and I don't think I think, in my opinion, that Knights Templar's treasure was, and that's just my opinion because I don't know. I think that the Templar had brought it over here, and I think that was partially used to fund the American Revolution, because I believe that the Templars thought that this was. I think that they come here, and in my opinion, from my research, and Sam, I know you've researched them a lot more. I think they were looking for a new place because Europe, not England, but Europe had not treated them well, and they were looking for a place to settle. And I think they wanted to be here in America, and that's just my opinion. And I think that was true. That wasn't the original Templars that fled, because that was many years later. But I think that they settled here from Scotland and everywhere else. I think that they had just kind of migrated this direction, and maybe not here in American common, but in our United States common, but Canada and all through this area, because there's kind of signs of them everywhere. Because they found all this stuff in, almost Hebrew stuff and stuff they keep finding around the Grand Canyon and stuff. They found all that stuff, and it looks like ancient Egyptian stuff and everything. And I can't help but to believe that that's stuff that had to come from some great treasure at one time. Because there's no other way to explain it that got here.
Well, we've got
I don't know.
we've got a lot of we've got so much content to give you guys. We've got so much
Yeah.
historical content to give you guys to open your eyes into the world that was, and how profound that was, and how profound it is today. What I can say about Freemasonry, and this is where I think people get mixed up, and if I can just use something else and explain to people why people get confused, because Freemasonry is, you've got your craft lodges, which we call blue lodges here. There are red lodges, which are Scottish lodges that are either here or in Scotland and all that kind of stuff. But then there are, there's the York Rite, there's the Scottish Rite, there are independent bodies, there are invitational bodies that have got degrees that are kept for, as those who have accomplished and have been deemed worthy, except that the accusation, or not the accusation, or you could call it the accusation, or the argument is Freemasonry is holding on to some ancient secrets that they have kept, and that is coded within the ritual. And as deeper as you get into the realms of Freemasonry, or to the ranks of Freemasonry, these rituals or these secrets get revealed. Okay, so let's pass that to the side, because there is that structure where you are given particular degrees as you advance. That's true in Craft Lodge in your first, second, and third degree. That's true in the York Rite or Mark Mason's Hall. That's true in the Scottish Rite. And then also then the invitational bodies, which there are many of. Now let me talk about martial arts real quick, and let me just explain that. If you are the Grand Master of your martial arts, and you have learnt all the katas or all the moves of your martial art, and you've effectively become the most sophisticated martial art combatant in your nation, if not in your continent or the world, and you know all these deadly moves, all these moves, or whatever it may be. The reason why it's broken down and there are layers from different, you may call it different belts or different orders. You start from the lowest, and the reason why there's a ranking system going on the top is to ensure that you don't abuse the knowledge that's been given to you through the ranks. You make sure that you understand what these particular moves are and how to control yourself. A lot of the martial arts is about self-control. And so not everyone can get to, although many do, but not everyone can get into the last belt or become a grandmaster or become a master. But it's about controlling. It's about being able to not only understand what a punch is or a kick is, but understand the power you possess. And if you talk to a lot of these great martial artists, some of the best, they are very, very constrained. They are very self-reflective. They are very kind of like, you don't hear about a grandmaster martial art going around, beating 50 people up randomly because he's just lost his temper. It's just very rare, very, very rare. Right. So, and the reason why there are stages in unlocking all these moves is if you were given the martial art rule book and you were taught everything and they were just like in the book and everything's there, some of us would soak it all up and will be that Zen monk in maybe a matter of weeks, right? Some of us will be, maybe it take a year. But a lot of us, because of just the way we are emotionally, where we're at, our experiences, our negative experiences, we may start to abuse that. We might take that power and start to morph it and abuse it and do great harm to a lot of people. And so the idea of the codifications and the layering and the ranking is to ensure that those who are the most worthy, those who have taken the time, the years, the reflections, the maturity, which is for a lot of us takes time, get to that place where they can then really understand the information that's given to them. And it's very egotistical and a lot of hubris for anyone, including myself, to say, oh, well, you can give me all of it, I'll be fine, and I am worthy. It doesn't work like that. If you told me that I would understand all the ritual that was given to me when I became a Master Mason, first off when I was given it and I was reading it, to what I understand about the text now, hell no. It took me a long time to oh my God, that's profound. I didn't realize that. And a lot of it...
like we was talking before, I'm still learning it.
Yeah, and still learning it.
Years later.
Yeah, years later, oh Jesus, that now makes a lot more sense. I can that particular text, that particular part of the ritual, I've got a lot more understanding, and you just get more deeper into it. And so that's the reason why Freemasonry has these layers. Is we're not worthy until we're able to progress as better men, really dig deep in ourselves and really understand ourselves and really get to a level where we're able to digest that information that's given to us. And even if it's given to us at early stage, too early, a lot of us don't understand it and may just abuse the position or the privilege that's been given to you in that position because you don't understand it. So with all organizations, and whether it's martial arts, whether it's tabletop wargaming, tabletop wargaming suffers a lot from this because it's literally just open book. Here's the rule book. Here are your armies. Play. And the problem with that, there is no ranking system. So there is a lot of abuse. Some people who are very apt into that know what to do, but don't have the inclinations of just trying to get the best experience for both players and just want to crush the opponent will come and they will crush the opponent and get their fix, but will burn 100 gamers who will never play the game again. So we
Right.
have seen open systems that have been open to abuse and just don't work and can, put a lot of people off. And then we have seen systems where step by step, as you progress, things get open. And I think that's the issue that's created a lot of the fantasies and a lot of the conspiracies, because many of those who wanted to get to that end point never got to that end point through frustration, through anger, through hatred. Very, very emblematical of the Jedi and the Sith, basically. Through anger, through
Yeah.
hatred, have turned and then have become miserable, and they've used their hatred, anger towards the fraternity because they didn't have that access. And that's really a bit of a self-reflection in oneself, as opposed to blaming an institution. And the most important thing to note about this is that I'm not saying that there is some profound, ancient knowledge that we have that we are keeping secret. I'm not saying there is or there isn't. That's not for this show to discuss those particular type of things. We'll go into the history and historical facts and break it down. But there is something fundamental about our organization, which personally, I believe this is 3,026 years old, from the time of the first temple of King Solomon. I think we have,
Yeah.
I think it's profound divine knowledge that we've preserved and that we're trying to preserve through the ages, and it has lasted this long. But I think we have to guard that Westgate. Whether it's guarding the basic fundamentals of the first 3 degrees, and then so on. It needs to be guarded, because when none of us come into the world equal, and none of us leave the world equal. Some of us come through a lot of trauma. Some of us come through an area where we're not ready. Some of us have to build on ourselves a lot more than others. It all depends on our situation. And so, because everything is so situational, we as Freemasons have to be guarded. We've got to make sure we recruit good men with high values and behaviors and good principles. And not all of us get to, become grandmasters and get to see all the rituals.
Sure.
And there are some of us who want to see everything and they want to have all the rituals. And some of us, whether through the internet, whether through whatever other ways, get access to all the rituals that were ever done, but don't understand it because they haven't gone through it, or they haven't had the mentor to teach them through it, or they haven't practiced it. And so it's just meaningless words that doesn't mean anything to them. And then they just feel diffused.
Right.
Does that all make sense?
Yeah. Sure does. So when I dug into back to the Green Dragon Tavern, and I honestly thought that I thought stuff out, and I thought I could, within a half hour I could give the synopsis of this. I was way wrong. So we're gonna have to do a whole show on this, because the Sons of Liberty, I've studied them a long time because they're fascinating with what happened with them, and the lodge that was located there in the Green Dragon. I'm just going to give you the highlights of this, and we'll have to come back. And Sam and I is going to have to break this down. There's just too much, so I'll just give you a little breakdown here. The Green Dragon Tavern was located on Union Street in Boston and served as the literal birthplace of the American Revolution, often referred to as the headquarters of the Revolution. The building was host to the meeting lodges of Freemasons and the Sons of Liberty, and also laid the groundwork for the Boston Tea Party. The original Green Dragon was purchased in 1764 by St. Andrew's Lodge of Freemasons, and it featured a distinct copper dragon above the door, and it was weathered green by the coastal air. That's how it got its name. Lodge rooms were upstairs and located above an operational public tavern. The upper floors served as a private meeting quarters for the St. Andrew's Lodge and the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts at the time. Key figures of the lodge meetings were heavily entwined with revolutionary politics, led by prominent members and Masons and patriots such as Grand Master Joseph Warren, who died in the Battle of Bunker Hill, and Paul Revere. When planning the revolution, the Green Dragon was famously dubbed the nest of treason by British officials due to its intense anti-colonial resistance planned within the walls. The Boston Tea Party, planning the Boston Tea Party, the Sons of Liberty were meeting in the basement, and the Knights of St. Andrew also helped organize the destruction of the tea. When the Midnight Ride was planned, the Patriots uncovered the British plot and arrested Samuel Adams and John Hancock, directly prompting Paul Revere to make the historic ride. The original tavern was demolished in 1832. Today, the history of the joint Masonic revolutionary efforts can be explored through the surviving relics. The dragon sculpture, which was thought destroyed, was found and preserved by the Scottish Rite and is now kept in their museum library. That's in northern jurisdiction, in their library. So that's just a little bit of history I have. I mean, we could talk for 2 hours and probably not cover all the stuff they have. There's just so much stuff.
Well, what's really interesting, and what's really brought warm to my eyes, we talked about this off air, is seeing a lot of my expats, my British compatriots come from England, Scotland, and Wales, and all throughout the United Kingdom and Europe, come to America and see how amazing America is. You've got all these YouTube videos from the World Cup attendees, literally just your basic, fans, football fans, come in and experience America and just go, whoa, this place is bloody amazing. I never knew about this. And my point is that we as a civilization, through Magna Carta, through the downfall of a king, King Charles, and then Cromwell, England, Europe, especially the English hemisphere, the British hemisphere, we've gone through a lot of blood and toil. And the story has been about individual freedoms and liberties of the common man. And a lot of what you have now in the Bill of Rights, and a lot of that, if you actually look at a lot of the acts of Parliament of the 1600s, I think it was 1688, are very emblematical of what the Bill of Rights became in less than 100 years of. And it was about property rights. It was about freedom. It was about being able to take care of your family without the fear or favor of, being a serf on the land for the rest of your life. It's about giving your children a better future. It was about being the right to defend yourself and not be overrun because, the opposite side had weapons and swords and you had nothing. So you had to be subservient to that particular lord or liege or king or tyrant. And there became the foundations of the colonies. And there you had a place where, a very special place, the Green Tavern, which we'll go into, the Sons of Liberty, which is a very special place in my heart, which basically created what I would say the 2.0, the next level, what England could have been and might be in the future in terms of the way the United States Constitution and the Republic and the way it was built. Even though I'm a monarchist, I love, in terms of my home country, I love the setup and the institutions of the founding fathers and what they did. And even when you dig deep and find out that actually a lot of the British side were not happy with the way, at the time, King George, the way he reacted and how much of a bit of a tyrant and a despot he was, and trying to push his agenda through Parliament. And even in England, there was this tit for tat of who had supremacy. Was it Parliament or was it the king? And he was kind of like the last king who basically he was trying to, have some measure of, autocratic power in England, and his son and those after him not only became Grand Masters of Freemasonry, but allowed Parliament to represent its people, the people to represent, as opposed of the autocracy of a crown, which actually helped Britain be so successful, even to this day within its own parameters. But here you have a people who I say it was always an English revolution. It was remember it was never a revolution. Actually historically it's not called it's called independence, the War of Independence. There was never really a revolution. It was independence from the crown that was taxing the people too much and putting on too many levies on the common man. And there was born the American nation, the United States of America, which today is basically the place to be in terms of opportunities, in terms of your disposable income, even in GDP, it's had the most miraculous growth and life in terms of the living standards compared to other nations. I think Britain is poorer in terms of nominal GDP and all that kind of stuff than Mississippi, apparently, or Missouri, they say. Which is astonishing. And a lot of people in England don't know that. And they always place England like seventh richest. If it was a state in America, it's not. It's actually below the 50th state. And so there are a lot of facts that people are now realizing. And the reason why I put the World Cup in is people now opening their eyes and like, oh my God, I didn't know about this. This is not what has been espoused to me by my local media and all my national media. So I think that's really interesting. And we're going to go into the history of the Green Tavern, of Sons of Liberty, and how Freemasonry through the ages has been able to, take our civilization to the next level and bring it to a place where there is more faith, hope, and charity. There are more freedoms. There is more tolerance. There is more reflection before we act and do things. It was the Freemasons in the United States of America that opened the first schools, which were actually within their lodges. People don't know this. You can there's a museum in Texas, in Grapevine, in a lodge, where they've got the very early schematics of the lodges, which are identical to the first schools. And it was the Masons who pushed for public schools in America, because it just became too much of a burden for the Masons to run. You forget, back in those days, the carpenter, the lawyer, the clerk, the banker, the farmer, it was a very male-orientated job market, and there was them who gave up their time to teach the kids, and then we passed that on to we can make it a government program where all kids had education. There was an anti-Masonic party that was so afraid of our influence in America that there was such a thing called the anti-Masonic party in America, back in the 1800s and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of history that's forgotten, and we're very bad in our current realm of reminding of not only our great American history, but our great history in England and in Europe, and how that's fundamentally created what we have today, not only in the United States of America, but also in Europe today as Freemasons around the world. And you can then understand why Freemasonry has been so prevalent in Europe, in America, in Canada, in Australia, and why it hasn't been so prevalent in other parts of the world where it was more autocratic and more tyrannical. And I'm looking forward to getting into those episodes, those historical episodes with you and me, going through these phenomenal men who changed the nature and course of history. And we're very thankful for where they are today and what they've done for us to be today. And they've made the entire Western civilization, in my opinion, better for it.
Well, I'd like to know, I'm kind of interested, and I never heard it, because I'm on this side of the pond. I'd like to know what the Freemasons on the English side, what they were thinking when they seen their English brethren over here fighting. I'd like to know, what was their opinion over there in England. I mean, there has to be some kind of documentation of that, isn't there?
Well, what's really interesting is Lord Cornwall, who I think we went into it lightly into the Empire and Crafts episode, but
Yeah.
he ended up in the end becoming the de facto head general of the British forces in the War of Independence. And if you actually go back to his history, he was actually against the tax levies that were imposed on
Sure.
the colonies. So things
Yeah.
weren't so straightforward. But you see, like Masons and like the values that we share between across the transatlantic, there's a call of duty. You know, when
Yeah, I understand
when
that.
your king calls you to defend your country, you defend your country, regardless
Sure.
of your personal political beliefs. And you made that oath or that duty, and you've made that commitment, that fealty to that king or to that president or to that country, whatever that fealty is. And so you fight for that country. So there was a lot of sympathy, especially in the British Parliament, especially amongst Freemasons. Even though Freemasons fought against Freemasons, as we find out in the War of Independence, there was a lot of, Freemasons either side. But back then, compared to warfare today, even though it wasn't crispy clean, there were rules of engagement. It was a lot less dirty than warfare is today. Even though there
Sure.
were some aspects that you would kind of like say, "Oh, that was a bit dodgy," whatever. But there was a rules of engagement, and you can get that in great fan fiction movies, which are emblematical of. There was a
Yeah.
moment where the Duke of Wellington sniper had a clean shot of Napoleon, and could have killed
Yeah.
Napoleon instantly. But now the Duke of Wellington said, "No, that's not how we roll. That those types of assassination things are beneath us. We fight like men and with honor, face to
Yeah.
face. And there was even some things that we kind of quiff at and cough at, and like this was ridiculous. The dueling was very popular on both fronts in America and also in England, more so in England, where if you offended someone, they'll get a glove and slap you in the face and say, "I will meet you
Yeah.
tomorrow with a pistol shot, and this is how we will end our dispute." Although we look at that and like saying that was a bit nuts, there was a sense of honor. Instead of me, murdering you on the spot or bringing my tribe of people and coming to take out your tribe, why don't we just settle this dispute between men? And although it was an extreme way of settling a dispute, but go for pistol shot, basically. But if you actually break it down, there was this sense of nobility, of honor, that we can deal with this man to man, we can deal with this in a better way. And so we will go into the history of how the Brits, don't forget, not long after 1776, in 1812. So about, what is that? About just under 30 years. There was the 1812, and Andrew
Yeah.
Jackson led a great counter campaign against the British invasion, and the Brits won the Canadian part of the war, and the Americans won the colonial side.
New
And
Orleans.
they came to an
Yeah.
agreement, basically. But in the end, after that war, hostility subsided, and we ended up becoming the most closest partners in the world, to an extent
Yeah.
where World War One, without the Americans, it could have gone haywire. Without the Americans in World War Two, Europe could be a fascist Nazi state.
Yeah.
The British, when the Americans called, we were there. In Kuwait, we were there to an extent. In Vietnam, we've had a legacy of coalitions, and we have a legacy of alliances, and both cultures are very, very interlinked and intertwined. And we've had good days and we've had bad days with each other, but I believe Freemasonry, to a huge extent, has brought us more together than apart. You forget FDR was a Freemason, Winston Churchill was a Freemason, right? I think these Masons really shaped history, but I think really helped build those bonds because they were brothers. I think it's something that we're missing a lot of in this age. But a lot of what the Masons built, that legacy, that special relationship, now has outlasted the prominence of Freemasonry in the West. And we've gone through a bit of the decline of Freemasonry with the two near extinction level events, which was World War One and Two, of our membership, and the fact that we're rebuilding Freemasonry, and it's going to take us another 100 years to get near our zenith, like we did before World War One. So people don't. It took me a long time to realize, Billy, the massive extent of what the two world wars did to both nations in terms of leadership, in terms of people not living who could have been something and someone. We're still living through those consequences of these two great wars even today, and which is amazing. We are hopefully rebuilding, and Illinois Freemasonry is in growth. We're growing, which is great. Other places around the world are growing, and what we need is more good men, more good leaders around the world that can bring people together and do more good. And we'll break it down, but I would argue that Masonry has created more harmony and has brought more people together, and has stopped the extremes of humanity in terms of total wars become absolute mind-numbing final wars. And there was a lot of good men who didn't press that button that could have or made some moves that could have wiped out. Remember, in the small scheme of things, slavery ended. Although we have what some would argue new elements of slavery through debt and financial instruments, we are still, as a people in the West, at least in America and in my country, better off than we have ever been from all levels.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we're perfect. Doesn't mean there are lots of problems, but we're in a good place.
And we're still getting better.
And we still need, there's still a lot of work for us to do. Don't get me wrong. There's still a lot of areas where we can improve, but everything takes time, and I hope one day humanity gets there. But that's what we're here to discuss. That's what we're here to break down, and it's going to be fascinating to share all of this knowledge with everyone who's listening around the world. And for those who are really interested in joining the fraternity, knock on the door. And remember, this may not be the right fit for you guys, or it might be. Knock on the door, ask questions, find the right particular lodge that have kind of like similar inclinations as you do. I just love the fact that there's a specialist lodge in England where it's a sci-fi fantasy lodge. I can't wait to go to England and hang out with those guys. They seem like an absolute a blast. And so there's a lot of exciting times, and have fun, and ignore all when someone talks about demons phoning them, or not only that, Billy, there's actually more. There are stories that have been said. I've read. I've seen stories that were written 100 years ago. Great fictional pieces that really scare the crap out of people when they read them, and really make people think. Because the written word and great storytellers can really weave a tale. And there's a lot of crap. There's a lot of falsehoods, which are great fiction pieces, but do put in the wrong type of ideas, and also put in the wrong type of misinformation, false information about us. And it's very easy to do that to an organization that has a great amount of humility, very humble. It's not about the titles. It's not about the accolades. It's about the battle scars on your back. And we're here to basically dispel all these myths. And hopefully in this episode, I hope that we've done some service to our orders, to Freemasonry, and dispelled some of this nonsense. And there is a lot of nonsense out there. And if we need to address a bit more of it and go into a bit more detail in future episodes, let us know and we will.
Yeah. So if you guys found any value in this, or if you happen to know anybody that would find value in this, and we try not to do this every episode or try not to do it very often at all, but please share this episode with anybody that's having any doubts or you think that might be influenced by some of this crazy, wacky stuff. You know, I know we made light of a lot of things that people said, you know, especially this guy on the internet, and everybody that's on the internet at all has heard some of this crazy stuff. But, you know, guys, this was really ridiculous. And, you know, anybody that's in Masonry that's active at all, you realize that all of our ritual is based off of the Holy Bible. And that's, you know, there's so much wackiness out there. And if Freemasonry wasn't something that was working, there wouldn't be people out there working so hard to destroy it.
Exactly.
So that's what you got to keep in mind.
Well said.
So, you know, with that, I'd just like to say thanks for listening to us all the time. You know, we got good numbers all the time. There's always at least 3,000 you guys listen to us, and that's a lot. And we appreciate you. And share us with your friends. And, you know, I'll say like I do every time, Godspeed, and thank you for being with us. Thank you for being loyal. And we'll keep our content up as long as you listen to us.
Absolutely.
Godspeed.
Absolutely. And me breaking from tradition and giving the final words, Billy, I'm going to just leave everyone with these few things that we always say in Freemasonry. And hopefully it's the actions and these few words that speak the most than all this nonsense. In this order, which we always say: God, family, business, then Freemasonry. All the best.
Well said.
Thank you for listening to On the Level Podcast, your Masonic podcast. When you are ready, duly and truly prepared, you can always knock on the door.